Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be tackling a sort of alien-looking, weird corridor animation. So let me show you what it looks like, and then we'll get into it. Okay, so here is the animation that we're going to tackle. We're going to do this depth of field, this animation here, the camera movement, this texture on the side. We're going to do all of this except for this glitch transition that was done in After Effects. All right, so first thing, Shift A, and let's add a cylinder. So on your vertices, give it 6 vertices, and then we need to rotate this by 30 degrees. So make sure your cylinder is selected. Go over here and on Z, I believe. Yep. So Z, type in 30, and now we have it like this, a sort of hexagon look. Now let's hit R, X, 90, and we're gonna leave it just like that. Okay, so in the transform on your scale, so this would be on the Z, just scale it up a little bit. I'm gonna scale it like this, and then just scale it back a little bit more. That looks about right. All right, now let's hit Tab, right click, and we'll subdivide it. We're gonna give it 12 subdivisions. That's 20. All right, so we'll give it 12 subdivisions just like that. Now, let's go up here to face select, and then we need to hold down Alt and Shift. And we need to select every other plane here. Not a plane, but every other section of vertices. So go right over here to Inset Faces, click that, and you're gonna use your mouse to click, and we're gonna inset it a little bit, right about that thickness. Now hit E to extrude, and then S so we can bring them in. So we have a problem here, and that is, all these are kind of extruding, sort of going into one medium point, which is the middle here. They're kind of going in like that, and we don't want that. So what we have to do, right up here, you'll see this little chain link kind of icon, click individual origins. So now when we hit E for extrude, S, it scales up at their own individual origin. So let's go back into the tube so we can see, and then just bring it in just like that. And then we'll inset it one more time, just like this, and then hit E, S, bring it in like that, and then we'll do it one more time, inset, E, S, and then scale it in, just like that. So now we have this interesting thing. Make sure that you keep these inside faces selected. Let's add 2 materials here. Let's get one, we'll make it metallic, and then let's make it fairly dark, so when we add our lights, it's not gonna overtake everything, so we'll just sort of get that done now. Now let's add another one. We're gonna click New, and then let's make it an emission shader. Give it a strength of 50, and make it blue. Now go back to edit mode. Now that these are selected, make sure that your emission shader is selected, and click Assign. So now when we hit Z and go to rendered view, we have this. Now if it's not glowing, I've seen quite a few comments, and I've neglected to say this, but if you go to this little camera icon in your Eevee settings, make sure you're in the Eevee render engine, here, make sure bloom is selected, otherwise it won't glow the way it's glowing on my screen. So for this particular render, you need ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflection selected. Next thing we need to do is make this this animating object here, the little alien look. So Shift A, add an icosphere, and then we just need to subdivide it, make sure it's perfectly smooth here on the smoothness, and go all the way up to 10 subdivisions. Now right click and shade smooth. Click on your icosphere, go to the modifiers, and add the displace modifier. All right, click New, click this little tab right here, and we'll go to the Textures tab, and we're gonna pick a clouds texture. This is completely up to you, this part, but if you wanna follow along, just keep doing what I'm doing. That's totally cool. Scale it down a little bit so it's not overtaking the cylinder. Bring it to right about there. We're gonna change that a little bit later. Let's add a mirror modifier. So on XYZ, click all of them. We have this. Now we need to go to the new bisect tab and bisect them all. You can kind of see what it does there. They're both pretty cool, but bisect gives it that really weird look to it, and it's a little more organized in the way it animates. So make sure bisect is selected. Now we need to animate this displacement. So Shift A, go to the curves, and click circle. Now we need to Shift A, go to empty, click a plane axis. Now click your plane axis, go to your constraints. It's gonna be right here, this little circle kind of lasso looking thing. Click add object constraint and click follow path. And then right here on target, click your Bezier circle. Okay, before we animate this, go to edit preferences. Make sure in the animation tab, your keyframe manipulation is on linear. For some of you who have older builds, the animation tab is in the editing tab, but in this particular, the newer builds, it's its own thing. So make sure it's linear, and we'll go on with animating it. So click on the empty, go back to the constraint, and right here on offset, this is where we're gonna animate it. First, right here on end, we're gonna give it 120 frames, and that'll make this a 5-second animation. Now right here on offset, right click, insert keyframe, click at the very end arrow here, and then click the right arrow. Make sure that you do that, otherwise this frame and the first frame are gonna be the same thing, and you're gonna have a slight 1-frame pause, and that's not gonna let it loop. So hit the right arrow to go to 121. Now on offset, click 100, and then insert keyframe. So now the empty is just rotating in a circle. Now click on your icosphere, go back to the modifiers, and then in displace where it says local, click object, and then click your empty. And so now when you click play, it's animating by the location of that empty. So I'm gonna make it a little bit more extreme on the displacement, and then go back to the texture, and I'm gonna change it just a little bit. I think that works right there. Okay, so if we look at it rendered, this is how it looks. It's a little bit too big, so I'm gonna click the Bezier, hold down Shift, click empty and icosphere so they all scale together, and it'll bring it right about there. And then we need to add a material to our icosphere. So go to the materials here, give it a new principled shader, and bring your roughness all the way down to 0. And so now we get this crazy reflecting. It's kind of gray in the middle, that's because of the world settings, so go to the world settings and bring it all the way down to black. And so now we have this going on. Now there's no reflection going on in here. We're gonna bake some reflection later, but that's why it doesn't look good at the moment. But just hang tight and we'll get to that. All right, I wanna send it back a little bit, so I'm gonna go to the wireframe view so I can see what's going on, and then click the icosphere, empty, and Bezier circle. And we're just gonna send them back a little bit. Right about to there. All right, let's quickly add our camera. So go to your camera here, go back to the view you want, try to be in the very middle, then Control Alt 0, snap the camera to view. I'm gonna hit G and then middle click, and then I'm just gonna bring it so that it fills the camera on our object here. All right, we need to add a point light to bring it behind this so we can add some emphasis to our composition. So I'm gonna go to wireframe view here, and I'm gonna hit point light, bring it right about here, hit 0 to go back to the view of our camera, and now it's way back here. It's way too bright, so we're gonna give it an energy of 2 and a red color. All right, we need to add some interesting stuff to go on in here on our shading. So click on your cylinder, go to the shading, and make sure that this metallic material is selected, and let's go up to the shading preset that we have in 2.8. All right, we're gonna hit the render button, and so we can see it, and we're gonna check out this area just to view, see what's going on. So first we're gonna add a noise texture, and we're gonna add a color ramp. And we're just gonna plug the color into the factor, and the color into the roughness. All right, let's bring the detail all the way up, and then bring the scale all the way up. Now we can kind of see what's going on. So in the color ramp, just make it more extreme. So right about there, you kind of see where the color is now. I mean, where the light is. So let's just bring it right about there. Make the white areas a little more extreme. And then overall, let's make the scale a little bit smaller. Now what I like to do is add one more noise texture to this to make it a really interesting look. It's kind of like adding turbulence, but it looks a little bit different. So let's add some turbulence to this and then scale it down some. So now you have this really interesting texture. Next thing we need to do is add a bump node. Plug the normal into the normal, and then plug the noise into the height. Super crazy right now, so just bring down the strength to where it's barely there. So bring it up just slightly. We want just a small bit of bump going on. So now we have this really, really interesting look. You can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, so I mentioned that we need to bake some stuff so we get more reflections in our icosphere. So what we need to do is Shift A and add a light probe, a reflection probe, and scale it up till it completely fills our scene, just like that. Hit 0 to go back to the view, click render view. Now click this little camera icon here and go to indirect lighting and click bake indirect lighting. So watch what happens. Boom, now we have all this reflection, and what it's doing is it's reflecting all the stuff over here that the camera can't see, but our object can see. So now we got a lot more interesting stuff going on in the reflection, and it kind of gives you little eyes. It gives it a little bit more of a creepy look whenever it animates. Okay, so the bloom is a little bit too much. It's overtaking our scene. So click on the bloom, and on intensity, just bring it down a little bit, just like that. And that kind of does it for the bloom changes. Last thing we need to do is add our camera movement. So on your camera, hit G, middle click, and bring it out till it passes up our cylinder. That's where it passes it up. So right here, we'll start the animation. So I'm gonna go back and change our keyframe interpolation. I'm aware of the shortcut, but for the guys who've never done this, I wanna show you where it's at. So right here on animation, just click Bezier. I'm gonna do a Bezier animation here. And then on the camera, go to the transform settings here, and it's gonna be on the Y. The Y is what's gonna animate it. So we're gonna animate the Y. So click this little circle and then go to the very end. I'm gonna stop it right here at 120. We don't need to actually hit the right arrow because we're gonna add a little bit. And then just animate it. Bring it all the way to the end here to right about there. And then click a keyframe. And so now our camera is going straight up to our object, to our creepy little object, just like that. Now I want it to kind of pause and sort of admire the animation here. So we're gonna click on the end and just sort of drag it to add some more frames to our animation. I'd give it to about 40. And so when it stops, we can just sort of admire the weird animation that's going on. Now we'll see right at 120, it stops. The animation stops, but it needs to keep going. So here's a little animation trick to make things loop in a longer animation. So we have our object here that's rotating at 360 degrees, basically, but how do you make that rotate more? We don't want to add maybe 720 degrees or 1080 degrees because we'll have to keep adding and adding that number. So what we can do, right up here in the animation tab, we'll use that here. We'll kind of go up here, hit Z to render it. Right here, I'm going to switch it to the graph editor. I'm going to switch it to the graph editor and then select your empty because that's what we're going to add to it. So it has some animation going on. Right here, we're going to drag this over, click the modifiers, and right here where it says add, click cycles. And what that's going to do is it's going to infinitely loop that looping animation we did. So if you watch here at the end of our animation, we'll click play. Even though it technically stops, it continues going. So if we were to add maybe 500 frames to this animation, our animation would, the rotating would continue. So now we can just check out the animation really quick, bring it all the way in, and there you go. So there you go. You made a weird, abstract kind of alien animation. Again, if you make it, send it to me on Instagram. I'd love to see it. You guys been sending me a lot of your work, and I really like that. So keep it coming, and thanks for watching.